Primary school teachers of Reddit, what is the most shocking display of psychopath-like behavior you've seen? One day when I was in primary school, I was sitting at my desk spacing off when one kid absolutely lost his crap and threw another kid into the desk in front of me and then just started beating on him, hitting him with desks, chairs, etc. The strange part is that the kid who went psycho was about half the size of the kid he attacked and was just running on pure psychotic rage. I and others sitting around this just bailed the frick out of our seats, though several people were bruised in the crossfire. It was a pretty brutal and shocking occurrence. I don't remember what the story behind his behavior was. He was removed from the classroom several times during the year for other disruptive events, though none quite so violent. I think in middle school or so he leveled out. Sounds like bullying. I went nuts on a bully once in 4th grade. Just kind of snapped and threw a chair at him when I'd had enough one day. I was a normal kid otherwise. I still don't know if this story is true, but allegedly this one girl and a few of her friends were in 3rd grade. I was in 5th at the time. Sneaked away from school and came across an old lady's house. They were playing out some adventure, so they decided the old lady was a witch, and they attacked her, beat her up, like, really badly, shoved dog crap into her mouth, tied her to a chair, and then they found her cat, and murdered it in front of her by swinging it into the walls. Fast forward to maybe a month ago, and I overhear this girl telling the story to one of her friends, and laughing, like it's the funniest freaking thing in the world. No remorse, just an attitude of oh well, kids will be kids. My sister-in-law taught a 5-year-old who killed a bunch of baby chicks that the class was raising. Apparently he thought it was hilarious, especially when all the other kids cried about it. Parents came in for a beating and they thought it was funny too. That was his last day at the school. At least they found the cause, I guess. I truly, honestly believe that my cousin is a psychopath. From grade school on. Frick, birth on. Even when he was breastfeeding he would bite his mom until she bled. Not your normal teething bites. It made him happy. As he got older he would take joy in beating our mentally retarded cousin with bats. That was about ages 2-14. His parents would always say that it was just a phase. When he was about 5 his dad would lift his arm up and punch him as hard as he could below the armpit to toughen him up. He was later sent to military school and kicked out. When he returned home he killed 4 stray cats, took them to the local Chinese restaurant, threw the dead cats at them and said, "Cook him up, he's now addicted to H and constantly in and out of jail." I had a babysitter once that invited him over. Unbeknownst to me, he left before I got back or knew about it. Soon enough my 1-year-old started choking and I pulled weed stems out of her throat. That was a bad day for them. I'm waiting for the day he kills someone. It shouldn't be long now. I'm glad your kid is okay. A student held open scissors to my neck. The look in her eyes was the most terrifying part. It took 5 adults to stop her. My mother works as an aide at our local public elementary school, and last year one of her charges was a severely mentally ill 8-year-old girl. This girl's parents both had mental illnesses of some sort, and the mom did drugs while she was pregnant, which surely didn't help. As a result, the girl was clearly a very disturbed individual. She self-harmed, had the tendency to scream and run away at random times, and when she got angry, which was often, her voice would go cold as ice. "I hate you," she would say. She was very intelligent, but also a pathological liar, very depressed and angry, and extremely violent sadistic. Once, she confided to my mother, "I think that the color of my blood is beautiful. Can I see your blood?" She would often throw paint stinging insects on other students, hit and kick the teacher's aides, and attempt to kill other children who she was angry at. Fortunately, an 8-year-old girl is restrainable. Basically, she was turning out to be a textbook psychopath. Her parents even bought her a BB gun in hopes that it would help her, which is the last thing I'd do. My mother said she had never seen such a miserable, hate-filled little girl. Now, you'd think that surely one of the teachers would notice the girl's mental illness and intervene. But that's apparently not how it works. All of the school staff, including the principal, knew that this child did not belong in the mainstream classroom, and that she desperately needed professional therapy, but, legally, they could not place her in a more appropriate setting without parental consent. They can suggest things to the parents, But if the parents decide not to get treatment for the child, there's really nothing the teachers can do about it. The problem is that the mom was a mentally ill drug addict who was constantly in and out of jail, and dad, while he meant well, had a touch of autism and refused to believe that his darling daughter was capable of such outbursts. So, although it broke the teachers' hearts that this girl's mental illness was being left untreated, they legally had no other choice but to put up with her in the mainstream classroom. Finally, after about a year of classroom disruptions, attempted escapes, and beating up teachers, the principal finally videotaped one of the girl's violent outbursts, and the father was finally convinced that his daughter needed help. With his permission, she was transferred to a special school district program where mentally ill kids can get one-on-one help without disrupting or harming the other students. I've heard that she's doing quite well there, and is steadily becoming less and less violent. Hopefully, she'll continue to improve. I'm honestly really glad this has a happy ending. So many stories don't. Kid I went to school with put acid in a school fish tank. Apparently got expelled from his previous school for blinding pigeons in the playground and his next school for chasing girls around with his dong out. His dad was in the Russian mafia, which probably had something to do with it. Not a teacher, but primary school is full of little shoots. It's not as bad as some of the other stuff here, but this story does show how fricked up kids are. Me and my best friend, when we were about 7/8, we found a whole load of woodlice in our schoolyard. At break and lunch we would play with them and we got obsessed with insects. Everyone thought it was super weird because we were girls, but we didn't care. Then one day all the boys in our class had taken the blades out of their toppers, and when we went out for break they ran ahead of us to the woodlice and just started cutting them in half. One of the lice was pregnant, and when they cut her the babies swarmed everywhere and the boys were just laughing as they smushed the tiny babies. Me and my friend were hysterical for the rest of the day. I get that killing insects is not as bad in people's minds as killing animals, but the way they got such pleasure from watching us try to stop them massacring the woodlice still creeps me out. I loved insects and other things that the other kids thought were gross. One of my friends once stomped on one of the snails I'd picked up to watch. It upset me so much. Killing something that is totally defenseless and not even in their way just to upset someone else. I totally understand why it creeps you out. Last week a student in my special ed class threw an apple very hard directly at one of our paraprofessionals' head. The apple hit her hard and I immediately called my vice principal. When the vice principal arrived I asked, "Well, you didn't mean to hit her, right?" To which he replied, "That's exactly where I was aiming. It was a good throw." I guess last year he took a razor blade and cut a classmate's leg open with it. He was sent to an alternative school for 2 months and he ended up back at my school. Kid scares the crap out of me. A guy in my primary school once snuck up behind the teacher and cut her ponytail off. The same kid also threw our pet hamster against the wall and then stomped his foot on its head. This killed the hamster. I'll get that kid committed ASAP. I had a 3rd grader bring a pack of razor blades to school on my first day. I pulled him outside the room, sat on the railing and said, "Hey, I'd like to understand why you did this." He calmly looked me in the eye and said he wanted to sharpen his pencils. I said people don't usually use razor blades to sharpen pencils, but I can think of a few reasons someone might bring razor blades to school. Maybe you wanted to hurt someone, or you were afraid someone would hurt you, or you thought they were cool and wanted to show them to your friends. He said that to cut up my food. Still totally calm. He got suspended for 1 day. To all appearances, he was a well-adjusted, smart kid who got along with his classmates. I did notice that every time I'd try to watch him out of the corner of my eye to get some insight into his personality, he immediately noticed and started watching me out of the corner of his eye. This isn't usually the case with little kids. He could also turn his emotions on and off like flipping a light switch. He never seemed to lose control, never acted angry, never cried, would sometimes get happy for a second or two, but tended to catch himself and stop. I still have no idea what to think. Sounds like he's a high-functioning, well-adjusted sociopath. He'll make a great politician one day. I was a preschool teacher a few years ago in a toddler room, 2-year-olds, and there was this adorable kid, very smart but psycho. I had to fill out an average of 3 incident reports a day on him. that had to be signed by a parent when he was picked up at the end of the day, and they just shrugged or made him apologize, which did nothing to deter him. This kid's father was in and out of jail for assault and drug related charges, and his mom was pretty much useless. He told me on several occasions, while holding a toy broom, that he was going to beat me with the broom until I bled and cried. He often attacked other kids for no reason. He used to tell one of the little girls that he was going to frick her. He called all teacher B when he was upset. Basically, this kid was nuts. I brought up the issues to my manager and the owner several times and they did nothing. So after 6 months of being this kid's punching bag and have my legs and arms covered in bruises and scratches, I quit. I didn't give them any notice. I walked into the office, told them I quit, and then grabbed my crap and gtfo. I used to be a day camp counselor. This one kid was seriously disturbed. We'd have him sit in timeout before swim time and he'd whisper how he planned on killing me. He'd regularly hit the other kids and introduced a lot of adult topics to the girls. We did look into abuse. Turns out his parents dealt with him by letting him play GTA all the time. We'd have to chase after him sometimes. He ended up biting me and one other counselor when we managed to get him back on camp property. By the rules of the camp, he should have been removed by the second week. However, there was some clause about not excluding children with disorders. They never told us what he was diagnosed with, but the running theory rumor was juvenile bipolar. In that case, I feel bad for him, but they should have been allowed to tell us what it was so we could make the environment safer for him and the kids in his group. The 16-18-year-old staff was not trained to deal with any of that. I am a teacher in Alaska. I knew a kindergarten, age 5, student that constantly terrorized the class pet, a bunny not named Lady, but I'll use that name for now. All forms of consequences and punishments did not work with this kid. He began to anticipate Lady's movement and escape paths, so one day he scared her and she went running to her safe spot behind the couch. He beat her to the couch, lifted the edge of it, and then slammed it down on her with precision so that she was pinned under the leg. Kids went running around screaming and crying as Lady was actually vocalizing a tortured squeal, a sound we had never heard. Once she stopped, the kid jumped on the couch to make her squeal again, but it was too late. She had passed. That is freaking horrible. I'm not a teacher, but when I was in first grade we had to draw a picture every day in this journal, and the one day we had substitute teacher. And I knew the teacher had to look over each drawing and would talk with the student to ask what the drawing is. So just to see her reaction, I drew a picture of a person stabbing another person. You can guess her reaction. I don't recall her telling my teacher or there being any consequences. When I taught 4th grade, I had guinea pigs in my classroom. A girl got to hold one at the end of class for giving great answers, behaving, etc. A boy was peeved because he had wanted to hold that guinea pig. He walked over to her desk and punched the guinea pig in the head until it died. Classic, if I can't have him, no one can. I'm not a teacher, but a friend of mine is a foster mom and has adopted a few of her foster kids. She has 8 legal children now. The oldest is 25 and the youngest are 2. Last month she took in a new foster kid, Kenny, who was 9 and liked to style people's hair and play with Barbies. Not too big of a deal, but she learned from the kid that he tried to kill himself by running away from school and getting onto a highway, tried to overdose his little brother with his own medication, and stabbed his mother with a pair of scissors multiple times. All this was confirmed by his previous foster parents. Within a week of having him at her house, the foster mom was getting reports from school that Kenny was masturbating in front of other kids in his class, flashing teachers, peeing on other people, threatening debauchery, what the actual heck, and kept asking the teachers to shoot him. He was placed in special ED classes and was in intense therapy, but the mom drew the line when Kenny came to school and told the teachers that he was planning to cut open the throats of his foster parents and siblings at night. Then he took a shaving razor out of his pocket and said that's what he planned on using. The kid is in a mental hospital now. I feel really bad for him since he had a history of sexual and physical abuse, and he was only 9. I had a student a few years ago that may actually be the second coming of Jesus. She was 6 years old, and since she was 4 she had been saying she was Jesus. Family was not religious crackpots. I did several home visits during my year with her. She would say things all the time. As the year went on she kept getting more and more intense about it. I was the only one who didn't tell her to just shut up. I questioned her and let her talk. Never told her she was right or wrong. Anyway, one day at recess she climbed up on some pipes and started shouting things about the devil is coming. He will throw those who are not prepared into anguish. Yada yada yada. I was called and we had a parent meeting and I convinced them to take her to a religious leader to have a talk. The religious leader spoke to her for a while, and I will never forget what he said. Little girl, oh boy do I hope you're making this up, but I really don't know. Her parents decided to heavily medicate her for a few years and then take her off and see if she still thought she was the second coming. She was taken out of the school the next year. I think about her often. Plot twist, you've actually made enemies with Jesus. I'm not a teacher, but I am psychiatric nurse on an inpatient child and adolescent unit. We get plenty of littlins who torture and kill critters. To see what it's like. Because it's fun. Because I can. For more attention, parents are often discouraged to learn there's no cure for sociopathy. Even through therapy it's hard to encourage positive behavior because almost nothing motivates them. They inevitably revisit us months or years later after graduating to hurting their classmates, siblings, parents, teachers, etc. Just a few weeks ago, I had to sub a class consisting of just one child and his para. This kid is in 5th grade and couldn't be with any other children. He'd always get into some sort of physical fight with them. It didn't help that he towers over almost every other child in the school. Not only that, but he says that he is evil. Every time he writes his name on the top of the paper, he titles it evil, insert name here. So not only is he physically intimidating, but he scares the crap out of everyone because he'll just, all of a sudden, screech or mutter evil scenarios to himself. When he couldn't have computers the day I was with him, his para borrowed a laptop from another teacher so he could play on a website he enjoyed. Wound up not going to that website at all. Instead, he went to Google and typed in evil, thoroughly enjoying everything that popped up. Overall, he freaked me out and I'm curious to see how he'll progress in life. A girl in my primary school was rather infamously cruel to animals and other people. In year 6 she managed to catch a squirrel. No one could work out how she caught the dang thing, and basically tortured it to death to show off to a boy she thought was cool, who being 10, ran off and told everyone but a teacher. It filtered through to the school staff soon enough and she disappeared for a couple days and then immediately came back exactly the same, but angry about something. She left and went to a different secondary school to me after that, so I didn't see anything. But rumors that filtered out from her all-girls school to our mixed one tell me she led a life of repeatedly bullying girls to near suicide and basically beating and berating every one of her near continuous stream of boyfriends for nearly all of secondary school until she was put into a young offenders institute a couple miles away at 16 for ABH or GBH. Can't remember which. Well, at one of the schools I work at I heard about a 9 or 10-year-old kid who would get caught masturbating in empty classrooms very often. I am not sure of the details, but when his teacher was getting observed by someone from the district sitting in the back of her classroom, very standard routine, the kid was in the front row jerking off and giving her a strange look. I guess none of the other kids seemed to notice, although that is hard for me to believe. She ended up finishing her lesson and not saying anything to the district representative. I have no idea how it was handled after. However, come to find out, his parents were going through a divorce and his father was a cross-dresser and would bring home a lot of different men. I am not sure if this had any effect on his behavior, but I can't imagine it was the easiest thing for him to handle. Sorry, I don't have much more information than that. I have no idea how it was handled after. I think he handled it himself. Not a teacher, but in 7th grade the school bully was in the office for something and asked if he could sit down. Some teacher responded, sure, knock yourself out, so the kid just started banging his head into the wall. Lots of blood everywhere before he was stopped. Thanks to him we had to be reminded on a weekly basis not to hurt ourselves. The most concerning student I ever knew wasn't one of my current students but someone that I went to school with. When we were in 6th grade he kind of broke down one day and climbed into the school's air shaft. He ended up in the ceiling. I have no idea how this works. Please don't ask me to explain. And threw a ceiling tile at our pregnant music teacher and she miscarried. Eventually the SWAT team, or at least that's what someone told me they were, came in and retrieved him. He was pulled from school the remainder of that year and all throughout 7th grade. He came back in 8th grade and had another episode that involved him trying to throw a heavy textbook at the belly of our pregnant science teacher. I guess he really didn't like pregnant ladies. He never came back to school again. I am speechless. Kid straight up got into a fight with my teacher in 4th grade and bit her when she tried to use the phone to call someone. He was laughing and crapping the whole time. I thought it was funny as frick. Didn't witness it, but happened recently. A kid I had in elementary school stabbed and killed 15-year-old with sharpened scissors. He's just 13. When I had him in my class, he threatened that he could have people come after me. After that incident he was nice to me, but I'd hear stories about him, like threatening a teacher's daughter with debauchery and said he'd kill them both. When I did my student teaching, there were 2 girls in my 4th grade class who were best friends. One weekend the 2 girls had a play date and apparently didn't get along with each other to the point where one of the girls cut the other's hair with scissors. Naturally, the girl with ruined hair decided to retaliate by putting her friend's pet guinea pig in the microwave and cooking it to death. I had a kid who once bragged about how he rode his bike so fast he caught up with a cat and was able to run it over. Then, he shrugged his shoulders and said, "But now I'm grounded, because I made sure it didn't wake up. My dumb dad won't let me ride my bike anymore." I just said okay and walked away. When I was a kid I did a lot of odd stuff like this. I got sent to the counselor for drawing people being killed. I set things on fire and oddly enough, I wet the bed until I was around 11 years old. I can actually remember the first time I wanted to hurt someone. I saw a girl fall off a slide and cry in pain. I felt the sudden urge to attack her. I didn't do it of course, but it's a very strong memory. It kind of felt the same as my first time noticing the opposite gender. I once dismembered my Stretch Armstrong doll and hid it. I would periodically visit the limbs, head, and torso which I had neatly arranged in a box. I told a friend this story when I was 20 and hearing his reaction made me realize this stuff wasn't normal. As an adult I was able to get into competitive fighting to channel my urges and form constructive relationships with violence. Growing up, my dad was a severe alcoholic but my mom was a son. I can only think what happens to people who are like me who had 2 crappy parents. Good thing you're taking out your urges on more constructive outlets. Still, I'd consider seeing a psychiatrist. You could have anything from mild schizophrenia to primarily obsessional OCD. It would be helpful to find out. I'm a daycare teacher, not primary school, but this girl is about 8 and has a whole mess of issues. Starts out with little things, like not listening and getting into teacher supplies, dumping toys out and refusing to clean up. Typical douchebag child stuff. But then it turns into physically shoving, fighting the teachers who try to stop her, screaming at the top of her lungs, accusing everyone of staring at her and laughing at her. I've several times had to separate her from the younger kids because she likes to hold them in her lap, hug on them too much, pull up their shirts and stuff. She masturbates in class by rubbing her legs together, and she does it all day, and then she screams at the kids asking her why she's all red and sweaty. It's disgusting and CPS was already called once. She's finally going to a school for kids with behavioral problems. Of course, now her 3-year-old sister is starting to do the same things. Ugh. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.